Truistery Vibes warmly welcomes all our beloved listeners. We're so glad to see you again in our familiar time slot.
Today,
Truistery Vibes brings you a brand new story, one that we hope will touch your heart and stay with you. As you listen, feel free to leave a comment sharing the quote or moment that left the deepest impression on you. Wishing you a wonderful and meaningful listening experience. Esme Caldwell eased the heavy oak door behind her and paused on the threshold of 1734 Maple Avenue, inhaling the cool Pacific Northwest air. The late afternoon sun filtered through towering Douglas firs, casting dappled patterns across the ivy-clad facade of the Victorian-style home. It was the kind of house that whispered secrets. Fish-scale shingles painted in faded seafoam, ornate gingerbread trim framing tall windows, and a wraparound porch wide enough for afternoon tea or a solitary guitar serenade. For Esme, this was more than a picturesque backdrop. It was her new life stage, and she intended to play her part flawlessly. She adjusted the strap of her canvas tote, where she'd tucked fresh croissants from Nolan's Bistro and a handwritten note for her husband, Beckett Worth. Beckett, a 30-year-old entrepreneur with an easy smile and a steady hand, had inherited the Worth family's beloved cafe, Heartwood Roastery, just 2 blocks away. He greeted every customer by name and the cafe's rustic chic interior, with its reclaimed wood tables and Edison bulb pendants, was a daily gathering spot for locals craving artisanal cold brews and crumbly cinnamon scones. Yet behind Beckett's warm demeanor lay a deep loyalty to tradition. He was the eldest son in a lineage of Washington pioneers who'd settled in Portland's Laurelhurst neighborhood a century ago. The Worths believed in early morning devotionals in the parlor, homegrown rhubarb pies on Sunday afternoons, and never forgetting to hang a wreath on the front door come winter. Esme, at 27, had grown up in a bohemian loft on Seattle's Capitol Hill, where vinyl records spun, abstract art propped against bare brick walls, and takeout noodles were a staple more reliable than homemade soup. Marrying Beckett meant balancing her free-spirited instincts with his family's storied rituals. Stepping inside, Esme was greeted by a familiar hush, the soft tick of a grandfather clock in the foyer, the muted murmur of voices drifting from the drawing room, and the faint aroma of lavender sachets tucked into every corner. She slipped off her weathered boots, revealing sensible loafers that clicked softly on polished floors. At the top of the grand staircase, a gallery of black and white photographs looked down, great-grandparents posing on steamboats, wartime letters displayed beneath glass, children in sailor suits standing beneath towering evergreens. Each frame told a fragment of Worth family lore, and tonight, Esme was determined to become part of it. A gentle cough announced her arrival. Beckett stood in the doorway of the drawing room, dark hair tousled from an afternoon spent finishing repairs to the cafe's espresso machine. He wore a chambray shirt rolled at the sleeves, well-worn jeans, and that reassuring look of someone glad to see you. "Hey," he whispered, closing the distance in 2 strides. He took the croissants and the note, "Welcome home. Can't wait for our first breakfast here together. Love, B," and tucked them into his jacket pocket. Then he kissed her temple, soft as a sigh. Behind him, Marlow Sinclair emerged, a vision in monochrome. At 22, Marlow carried herself like a social climbing monarch, slender frame draped in a tailored blouse and high-waist trousers. Her ash-blonde hair was pulled into a sleek chignon, and her patient blue eyes betrayed nothing, but in that moment, they sharpened as they flicked from Esme's tote to her husband's pocket. Marlow was Beckett's baby sister, the only daughter among 3 siblings, and she had been indulged like royalty since the day she was born. From private violin lessons to designer handbags shipped directly from New York, Marlow's world was one of polished surfaces and exacting expectations. Esme offered a polite smile.
"Hi, Marlow."
Her voice was calm, measured. She'd practiced this greeting in the car on the drive over, memorizing the tone of genuine warmth that would please the Worth matriarch. Marlow inclined her head, almost imperceptibly. "I see you brought croissants," she observed, lips curved in a half-smile that felt more like a question than a welcome. Esme shrugged lightly. "Nolan's makes them fresh every morning." Thought we could try something different for breakfast. Beckett's expression tightened for a heartbeat, torn between his sister's judgment and his wife's good intentions. But then he recovered his easy warmth. That sounds perfect. Esme's homemade quiche is delicious, but variety is nice. Marlow's smile widened just enough to signal concession. She motioned with a delicate hand toward the sweeping staircase. Mother and father are in the study. Dinner will be at 7. You're welcome to join us. Esme nodded, her chest tightening in anticipation. She'd met Mr. and Mrs. Worth briefly at the ceremony, but tonight would be her true introduction into the family's inner circle. In the hallway, as Marlow retreated toward the library, Esme turned to Beckett. She's something. Her voice wavered between amusement and uncertainty. He slipped an arm around her waist.
She is.
But I promise, you'll figure her out. His eyes were warm, but his hand tightened on her hip, as if bracing for a storm. Come on, let's drop these off in the kitchen and say hello. As they crossed the polished wood floors, the late light settled into long shadows, and Esme realized how different this world was from the lofts of Seattle. Here, every creak of the floorboard carried generations of history, and every heirloom clock seemed to tick in sync with family expectations. But beneath her nerves, a spark of excitement glowed. She was no stranger to forging her own path, and tonight would be her first step toward shaping a new chapter, one that blended her independent spirit with the Worth family's enduring legacy. The morning light seeped through the lace curtains as Esme Caldwell padded into the breakfast nook, her fingers still tracing the steam rising from a cup of freshly brewed single-origin espresso. The Worth's Victorian home was quieter at dawn, save for the soft hum of the espresso machine in Heartwood Roastery, which Beckett usually tended to before closing time the previous evening. But this morning held a hush that felt charged, as if the walls themselves had braced for impact. Esme set her cup on the marble tabletop and reached for the butter dish, only to find a folded note in Marlow Sinclair's precise handwriting. Please arrive downstairs by 7:30. Mother expects us all for breakfast. She glanced at the clock. 7:12 a.m. Plenty of time. Smiling to herself, she poured cream into her espresso and savored the rich aroma. Today would be her first full family breakfast. It was her chance to show she could blend her own flair with Worth family tradition. She'd chosen a light outfit, an ivory blouse with delicate lace at the collar, paired with a navy skirt that fell just below the knee, careful to strike the balance between respectful and personal. A gentle knock sounded at the door. Esme opened it to find Beckett, his rumpled hair slightly more tamed than last night, carrying a plate of freshly baked popovers he'd fetched from Nolan's. Good morning, he said, voice low but warm. He kissed her cheek and set the popovers beside her espresso. Figured these would go well with the jam Mother made yesterday. Esme's heart lifted. They're perfect. Thank you. They drifted down the hallway, past the rows of sepia-toned family portraits, until they reached the grand staircase. At the foot of the stairs stood Marlow, arms crossed, posture statuesque. The sunlight caught the gold threading in her cashmere cardigan, emphasizing every precise crease of her designer trousers. Marlow's gaze flicked to Esme's blouse, then to Beckett's casual button-down. You two are running on Worth time, she observed coolly, fingers curling around the banister. Mother likes punctuality, 7:25 sharp, not 7:35. Beckett frowned but offered Marlow a placating smile. We're early enough. Marlow's lips curved into a half-smirk. Enough is never enough. She turned and led the way into the formal dining room, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. Inside, Mrs. Adrian Worth presided at the head of the long table, draped in soft lavender silk, and Mr. Simon Worth sat at the opposite end, reading the morning paper. Their pastel china plates were set atop lace placemats, with silver cutlery glinting beneath the crystal chandelier overhead. The linen napkins were embroidered with the family crest, a stylized pine tree encircled by laurel leaves. Esme's stomach fluttered as she took her seat to the right of Mrs. Worth. Beckett followed and slipped an arm around her chair, giving her a quick squeeze. You're going to be fine, he whispered. Breakfast unfolded with genteel precision. Mrs. Worth ladled steaming Sahale nut granola into each bowl before offering fresh berries. Mr. Worth poured Penzance blend tea from fine china pots. Marlow tapped her spoon against her cup, as though timing each exhale. Esme began by offering a slice of popover to her mother-in-law. I hope you like them. Nolan's Bakery in the Pearl District just started a new batch this morning. Mrs. Worth removed her glasses and studied the pastry. Delightful, she said. Light, with a hint of nutmeg. She sampled a small piece, then nodded graciously. Encouraged, Esme tried to engage Marlow. I thought you might enjoy the lemon curd with them. It's Mrs. Worth's recipe. Marlow dipped her spoon into the curd and gave it a perfunctory taste. Sweet, she pronounced. But my palate prefers something tangier. She glanced sidelong at Esme. Shivan Citrus Grove on 23rd has a blood orange marmalade that truly wakes up the taste buds. The table fell quiet. Beckett stiffened beside Esme, and Mrs. Worth's smile tightened slightly. Marlow's remark had been innocuous on its own, but coming after Esme's polite offering, it stung like a splash of cold water. Esme slowed, placing her spoon down carefully. Thank you, Marlow. I'll keep that in mind. She reached for her tea, but as she lifted the cup, Marlow's tone nudged her chair, like a cat flicking its tail in disdain. Esme caught Beckett's gaze. He raised an eyebrow, concern flickering in his eyes. Mr. Worth cleared his throat. Marlow, dear, perhaps you could pass the toast. Marlow sighed softly and plucked the toast basket from Esme's side. Of course. She offered the basket to her grandmother, then to Mrs. Worth, before depositing it back at Esme's elbow. The basket held perfectly brown slices of honey wheat toast, topped with bits of homemade jam. Esme assembled a piece, jam on one, butter on another, hoping to reset the tone. She offered a plate to Marlow. I'd be honored if you'd try some. Again, Marlow's polite smile never reached her eyes. Thank you, she said, but didn't touch the toast. Instead, she raised her cup, took a sip, and set it down with exaggerated care. The rest of the meal passed in strained civility. Esme found herself tiptoeing around her plate, cautious not to overstep unspoken boundaries. When the table cleared and Beckett rose to refill everyone's tea, Marlow sniffed and remarked, It's rather late in the season for lavender sachets. Perhaps the gardeners forgot to dry some for summer? Esme's chest tightened, but she met Marlow's gaze squarely. I actually love the scent. It reminds me of home. Marlow inclined her head, but her expression remained unreadable. Different strokes. She turned to Mrs. Worth. Mother, I was wondering if you had those spring bulbs in the greenhouse. I'd like to pot a few this afternoon. Mrs. Worth's lips twitched. I can show you, dear. Esme realized she was caught in a crossfire of subtle barbs and veiled slights. Each comment from Marlow, under the guise of friendly conversation, chipped away at the communal warmth Esme had hoped to foster. It was the first true indication that Marlow intended to test her resolve from the very beginning. After breakfast, as Esme cleared the dishes with Mrs. Worth, Marlow slipped past to the conservatory. Beckett lingered by Esme's side. I'm sorry, he murmured. I should have given you a heads up. Marlow can be particular. Esme smiled wryly. I figured as much. I guess I'll need to learn what particular means in Worth speak. He nodded, pride shining in his eyes. The greatest ones always are. As Esme carried the breakfast dishes away, she felt a flicker of determination spark within her. The Worth family's traditions were a world apart from her Capitol Hill loft. Marlow's early onslaught had made that abundantly clear. But Esme was not one to retreat. She would meet each challenge, each microaggression, each raised eyebrow, with calm confidence. And when the day's events drew to a close, she would have carved out her place in this storied household, one popover at a time. In the quiet aftermath of breakfast, as the Worths retreated to their respective routines, Esme paused on the back porch. The garden, dew-kissed and vibrant, seemed to beckon her forward. Taking a deep breath of lavender and pine, she reminded herself, beginnings were never easy, but they held the promise of something new. Today had been her first clash, a prelude, perhaps, to the trials ahead. Yet it had also revealed her own strength. With that thought, Esme stepped inside to face whatever came next. The week that followed tested Esme Caldwell in ways she could never have anticipated. From the moment she opened her eyes each morning until she closed them at night, she found herself navigating a minefield of subtle jabs, unspoken expectations, and carefully orchestrated provocations at the hands of Marlow Sinclair. Esme had thought that winning over Beckett's family would come with charm and a genuine desire to contribute. Instead, each day revealed another unspoken rule she had to learn, another standard she had to meet, or be reminded that she had failed to do so. On Monday morning, Esme rose before dawn, as she had every day since moving into the Worth family's Victorian home on Maple Avenue. She slipped out of her guest room and down the quiet hallway, passing portraits of Worth ancestors who seemed to watch her progress with solemn eyes. In the conservatory at the back of the house, she tended to the lavender and ferns, clipping spent blooms and misting tender new shoots. The glass walls steamed in the chilly air, and she sipped on a cup of City Lights espresso from Beckett's cafe, making notes in her leather-bound journal about each plant's condition. By the time she returned indoors, the household was stirring. Esme entered the laundry room to tackle the linens. Embroidered pillowcases, heirloom damask napkins, and Marlow's cashmere cardigans, each bearing a monogrammed S for Sinclair. She sorted whites from colors, silks from cottons, and set the machine to delicate cold wash. She then laid the cashmere garments flat to dry, each scarf and sweater carefully arranged on the drying rack. An hour later, Esme returned to find one of Marlow's cashmere wraps scrunched on the floor and marked by 2 small clicks of a sewing seam. Marlow hovered in the doorway, arms folded. "Cashmere must be laid completely flat to avoid stretching," she said in a tone that sounded innocent. "Next time, hand wash only, then pat into shape with a towel." She picked up the damaged wrap, examined the seam, and sighed. "I'll have to take this to the specialist." Esme's heart sank. "I thought delicate cycle was acceptable," she protested gently. Marlow's lips curved in the barest hint of a smile. "Machine detergents, even mild ones, have enzymes that weaken fine fibers. You'll learn." Esme nodded, cheeks burning, and mentally marked her first lost skirmish of the week. Tuesday's battle unfolded in the wine cellar. Esme, hoping to show initiative, had studied Mrs. Worth's extensive list and selected 2 bottles, a 2018 Oregon Pinot Noir and a 2019 Napa Chardonnay, to accompany that evening's charcuterie spread. She placed them on the kitchen island alongside artisanal cheeses and imported olives. When Marlow walked in, she scanned the bottles, raised her slender eyebrow, and said, "I thought we agreed to reserve those for year-end celebrations." Beckett, arriving with a platter of spring vegetables, glanced anxiously between them.
I'm sorry, Esme.
"She's right." Marlow took down a bottle of estate Cabernet Sauvignon instead. "This pairs better with aged Manchego." She popped the cork with a practiced twist and poured 3 perfect glasses. The Pinot and Chardonnay Esme had selected were returned to the rack without further comment. Esme swallowed a lump in her throat. She would never touch those 2 reserved bottles again. Wednesday's skirmish came at breakfast. Esme set the table in the Glaston solarium, using Mrs. Worth's china adorned with pale pink peonies and silver flatware. She laid out freshly baked popovers, Esme's own recipe she'd perfected at Nolan's Bistro. She had even whipped strawberry lavender jam from the garden's harvest. Marlow arrived, paused at the table, and tapped a finger on a single popover. "These would be more balanced with a hint of lemon zest," she said, voice mild. She reached across and grated lemon peel over each one before anyone could stop her. As the family gathered, Mrs. Worth admired the popovers. "Delightful," she said, unaware of the tiny citrus flakes dancing on their crusts. Esme bit into hers hesitantly, tasting the sharp tang. She forced a smile, vowing that the next batch would anticipate Marlow's hidden preferences. Thursday's coup de grace occurred during the midday clearance. Esme, attempting to lighten the workload in the drawing room. Wiped down the coffee table and the antique sideboard after Mrs. Worth's circle of bridge players had departed. She used a lavender-scented polish that she thought fitting. When Marlow entered, her gaze flickered over the surfaces. "You shouldn't mix lavender with bay laurel," she said crisply, picking up the bottle. "The scent notes clash. Try cedarwood oil instead." She exchanged the bottle for a slender amber one, then buffed the furniture until the polish delivered a subdued pine aroma. Esme bit back her frustration. She made note in her journal. Never use lavender polish in common areas again. Friday found Esme in the greenhouse at dawn, carefully deadheading a row of peonies for a weekend horticultural tour. She knelt in the humid air. Voice hushed as she clipped spent blossoms, tethered fragile stems to stakes, and cleared wilted foliage. When Marlow arrived in the early light, she watched for a moment before snapping a single photograph on her phone. "Don't you think the suckers at the base should be removed?" she asked. "Otherwise the plant directs energy into unwanted shoots." She demonstrated, cutting away green shoots at the stem's crown, leaving Esme to wonder why Mrs. Worth hadn't asked for such pruning when assigning the task. Esme straightened and noted, "Prune suckers." Saturday brought the culinary challenge. Esme volunteered to prepare a 3-course meal for the Worth's charity luncheon: roasted beet salad, seared salmon with dill yogurt sauce, and a rhubarb ginger tart. She assembled the salad with baby arugula, goat cheese, pistachios, and warm maple vinaigrette, then moved on to the salmon. She filleted the fish with care, seasoned it, and pressed it gently onto a hot cast-iron pan. As oil crackled, the kitchen filled with the aroma of garlic and dill. While the fish rested, she whipped yogurt into cheese-like fluff and stirred in chopped dill and lemon. Marlow drifted in mid-prep with a clipboard. She watched Esme assemble the plates, then reached over to add capers to each salmon fillet, tapping on the side of the bowl. "A burst of brine brings the flavors alive," she explained. She then rearranged the salad's pistachios in neat pyramids rather than the scatter Esme had chosen. When it was served, Mrs. Worth praised the artful presentation, crediting Marlow's final touches. Esme bit her tongue as others complimented the intricate nut pyramids. Sunday's final confrontation of the week occurred in the living room. Esme dusted antique curio cabinets filled with porcelain figurines and family heirlooms. She moved methodically from left to right, wiping each shelf, realigning objects to face forward. After a quick lunch, she returned to find the curio's contents rearranged, figurines grouped by color instead of origin, books displayed spine inward. On a coiled ribbon lay a single handwritten note: "Display by hue to create visual harmony." Esme gathered the figurines, grouping them by origin instead, then paused. Harmony for whom? She placed the note between 2 figurines: an ivory horse and a cobalt blue vase. Then she left them there, a reminder that in this household, harmony was a puzzle she would need to solve, one barbed piece at a time. By Sunday night, Esme's journal had 50 bullet-pointed lessons. Always lay cashmere flat. Avoid machine wash. Consult Marlow before choosing wine. Add lemon zest to breakfast popovers. Use cedarwood polish, not lavender. Prune suckers when reaching deadheads. Garnish salmon with capers. Arrange pistachios in pyramids. Group display items by hue. She closed the journal and placed it on her bedside table. That week had been grueling, but Esme felt a new strength stirring within her. Each silent, barbed remark, each helpful correction, had shown her the map of unspoken rules governing the Worth household. She now had clues to navigate the expected path. The skirmishes had honed her resolve, sharpened her instincts. And although she felt exhausted, she also felt ready for whatever came next. As she lay in bed that night, Esme pictured the grand staircase and the portraits of the Worth ancestors. They had weathered storms, built homes, started businesses, and they had thrived. She was now part of that lineage. If she learned the rules, anticipated the next move, and forged her own way through each silent conflict, she would prove she belonged here as much as any Worth heir. Tomorrow would arrive with fresh tests, perhaps a misaligned table setting or a critique of her morning tea steep. But Esme Caldwell was prepared. She would rise before dawn again, tend to the plants, record her notes, and step into the Worth household as a daughter-in-law with confidence, grace, and the ferocity of someone determined to succeed. And one day, she would look back on these daily skirmishes as the forging fire that made her unbreakable. The tension between Esme Caldwell and Marlow Sinclair had been simmering since her arrival, but it reached a boiling point one storm-lashed evening that would forever change the dynamic in the Worth household. Beckett had been away on business in Seattle, leaving Esme to plan and host the family's annual Founders' Day dinner, a Worth tradition celebrating the day their great-great-grandfather, Elijah Worth, established the first iteration of Heartwood Roastery. It was both an honor and a crucible for Esme, an opportunity to prove her worth, or have her shortcomings laid bare. Esme spent the day preparing in the cavernous Worth kitchen. She followed Mrs. Worth's handwritten recipe for elderflower, honey-glazed quail, perfected a roasted beet and citrus salad with goat cheese Montmorency cherries, and assembled a trio of mini lemon chive tartlets. She practiced her greeting in the mirror, warm, confident, gracious, and polished the silver candlesticks until they gleamed. Outside, rain battered the stained-glass windows, and thunder rumbled through the rafters as if Fortune herself tested her resolve. By late afternoon, the table was set, a dark walnut farmhouse table draped with a moss-green runner, place settings of ivory china edged in gold, and crystal goblets positioned beside cut crystal water tumblers. At the center, a low arrangement of white orchids and succulents offered a modern touch. Candles flickered in anticipation. The scene was regal, steeped in family heritage, yet infused with Esme's fresh sensibility. Marlow arrived just as Esme completed a final inspection. She lingered in the doorway, hooded eyes taking in every detail. "Interesting choice," Marlow said, voice light. "Green runner. A bit dark for spring, don't you think?" She stepped forward, trailing a fingertip through the runner's fringe. "Our ancestors preferred lighter hues, cream, pale blue." She glanced at the eggplant-colored quail glaze. "That looks more like a winter dish." Esme swallowed the lump in her throat. "I wanted to introduce some contrast," she explained. "Elderflower pairs beautifully with spring produce." Marlow sighed and retrieved her phone. Her manicured thumb tapped out a message. "Mother, I've made a few adjustments to the table decor. Should be more in line with family tradition." Within minutes, Mrs. Worth responded. "Thank you,
dear.
I trust your taste." Marlow nodded at Esme, a thinly veiled, "I told you so" in her expression, then swept away toward the walk-in pantry. Esme steadied herself with a deep breath. She had hoped for unity tonight, not another needless rebuke. But Founders' Day was a showcase, and Marlow clearly intended to dominate it. At 6 o'clock, the Worth matriarch and patriarch descended the grand staircase, umbrellas dripping in the foyer. Mrs. Worth wore a dove-gray silk gown and pearls. Mr. Worth carried himself with stately pride, his silver hair combed back. They paused in the entrance to admire the table, and Esme offered them warm smiles. "Everything looks wonderful," Mrs. Worth said, voice warm but cautious. "Thank you for hosting, Esme." Mr. Worth nodded gravely. "It's a proud evening for our family, and you've done us honor." Esme exhaled relief. She led them into the dining room, where Marlow appeared with wine glasses in hand. "I thought we'd start with a Worth Reserve Chardonnay," she announced, pouring crystalline liquid into the goblets. "A 2020 vintage, crisp with hints of apple blossom." Esme took her seat, grateful that at least one offering had Marlow's imprimatur. They toasted Elijah Worth's legacy, and conversation turned to family lore. Esme listened intently, occasionally offering anecdotes. The time young Elijah delivered his first roasted coffee beans to saloon patrons. Beckett's battles winning the neighborhood baking competition, Mrs. Worth's secret rhubarb jam recipe. But as the quail arrived, her piece de resistance, Marlow rose to rearrange the serving platters. She slid Esme's elderflower, honey-glazed quail to the opposite end of the table, exchanging Esme's moss-green napkins for pale blue linen ones she had fetched from a sideboard. Without missing a beat, Marlow flashed Mrs. Worth a radiant smile. I remembered last year's theme. Esme's hands trembled. Marlow, I planned it this way, she began. Marlow turned to her brother. Beckett, dear. Shall we continue? The salad is waiting. Her tone was playful, but her eyes held steel. Esme gathered her courage. Actually, I'd like to explain the pairing. The moss green runner was chosen to highlight the succulents. Before she could finish, a loud crash reverberated from the foyer. The front door had slammed open, and a drenched figure staggered in. Beckett, soaked from the rain, removed his coat and tossed it aside. Esme, he breathed, I'm so sorry. Traffic was a nightmare. He paused, taking in the scene. And, Marlow, I see you helped yourself to my grandmother's pantry again. Marlow flushed. I was simply ensuring the proper napkins were used, as Mother would have wanted. Beckett frowned, glancing at his wife. Esme's vision for tonight. He stopped, noticing the plated quail. He took a forkful and tasted it thoughtfully. This is incredible. The elderflower and honey glaze is perfect. He met Marlow's eyes. Thank you, but I want to honor Esme's menu. Marlow's lips pressed into a line. If you prefer. A tense silence followed as Beckett took his seat next to Esme. Mrs. Worth, sensing the undercurrents, raised her glass. To family and to new traditions. She sipped, smiling at Esme. You have a gift, dear. I adore the flavors. Esme dared to exhale. She realized how close she had come to being sidelined entirely. But Beckett and Mrs. Worth had validated her efforts, turning the tide. Marlow's eyes narrowed slightly, but she remained seated, her face composed. As dinner progressed, conversation flowed more freely. Mr. Worth complimented the salad, Beckett praised the tartlets, and Esme basked in the warmth of approval. When dessert was cleared, Marlow rose. Thank you all for this evening. I'll take care of the dishes. She slipped from the room with practiced grace. Left alone at the table, Esme turned to Beckett. I'm sorry for the turbulence. He reached across and squeezed her hand. You were magnificent. He looked at Mrs. Worth, who offered Esme an encouraging nod. Later, Esme retreated to the conservatory for a moment of solitude. Rain lashed the panes, and candles flickered on the dining table. She could still see through the door. She felt Beckett's arm around her from behind. You turn the tide tonight, he whispered. She leaned into him. It felt like an ambush. He kissed her temple. You showed them why you belong. At that moment, footsteps approached. Marlow returned with the dish towels. She paused at the threshold, gaze shifting between Esme and Beckett. Good job tonight, she said quietly, almost sincerely. Then she turned and disappeared into the kitchen. Esme watched her go, pulse still racing. The climax of their conflict had occurred not through shouting, but through silent battles over every detail, decor, napkins, wine, menu. Yet that night she had proven herself. Her flavors won over the matriarch and her husband, and her vision endured. As the echoes of thunder faded, Esme realized that from this point forward, she and Marlow were locked in a test of wills. But she had emerged from the crucible with her talent and dignity intact. She closed her eyes, feeling the rain's rhythm on the glass. The Worth household might demand conformity, but she had learned that grace under fire was her greatest strength. And with others at her side, she would shape her own place within their storied legacy. The storm that had tested Esme's resolve in Part 4 was nothing compared to the tempest that brewed in the shadows of Worth Manor. In the days that followed Founders' Day dinner, Marlow Sinclair's cool civility masked a deeper ambition, and she had found an eager co-conspirator in Lia Monroe, Beckett Worth's former college sweetheart. Their alliance would prove to be Esme Caldwell's most virulent challenge yet. Marlow first met Lia at a Newport Beach fundraiser for coastal wildlife preservation. Lia arrived in town on business, and Marlow, ever hungry for social advantage, formally introduced herself at the VIP reception. Lia, a polished public relations executive with a predilection for crisp, white linen suits, recognized Beckett's surname and was glad for the opportunity to reconnect. Over canapés and Sauvignon Blanc, Marlow floated a suggestion. Beckett's new wife is talented, but I wonder how she'll manage the Worth legacy. Lia, her pale blue eyes narrowing thoughtfully, responded, perhaps Esme needs a guide. The seed of conspiracy was sown. Back at Worth Manor, Marlow began subtly undermining Esme's standing. She timed her social calls so that Lia would run into Beckett at the Worth family's private tennis court, always wearing an expression of wounded nostalgia. Lia arrived, clad in tennis whites and carrying a wicker basket of fresh fruit, and greeted Beckett with a smile that spoke of shared history. "It's been too long," she murmured, brushing a stray hair from her face. "I missed our matches in Berlin." Beckett's brow furrowed in surprise, but he recovered with a polite hug. Esme, tending the houseplants in the adjacent sunroom, sensed the undercurrent. From behind a curtain of ferns, she watched as Lia led Beckett through a discussion of old times, recounting a ski trip they had taken after graduation. Marlow lingered at Lia's side, arms crossed and eyes hooded in satisfaction. It was the first time Esme realized Marlow's duplicity was active, not passive. That evening, Marlow sent Esme a text. "Mother wants you to prepare the guest suite for Lia. She arrives tomorrow afternoon." The message bore the same clipped politeness that marred every confrontation. Esme pressed her lips together and texted back, "Of course." But her mind raced. Lia's presence would threaten the delicate equilibrium Esme had fought to maintain. The next day, Esme prepared the guest suite with meticulous care. She fluffed pillows, laid out fresh towels folded into perfect rectangles, and arranged a vase of lilies on the bedside table. She included a selection of tea blends from Heartwood Roastery, believing a comforting touch would make the visitor feel welcome. In her journal that morning, she had written, "Welcome Lia with kindness. Hospitality is your advantage."
Still,
her stomach twisted in anticipation. Lia arrived precisely at 3 p.m., accompanied by Marlow. Beckett was called away at the last minute to oversee a new coffee roasting machine at the cafe, leaving the two women alone in the grand foyer. Lia's trench coat was undone to reveal a crisp high-collar blouse and tailored trousers. She paused in the doorway, surveying the staircase and the marble floor. "This home is magnificent," she said. Her voice was honeyed, but Esme detected an undercurrent of something sharper. Calculation, perhaps. Lia swept past Esme and placed her luggage in the suite without a glance at Beckett's wife. Marlow followed, issuing a quick apology. "I know this was Esme's detail. Mother asked me to arrange it this way." Lia offered Marlow a quick nod of thanks, but did not look toward Esme. Esme's cheeks warmed. She squared her shoulders and cleared her throat. "If you need anything, I'll be just down the hall." Lia's only response was a polite smile. She withdrew into the suite and closed the door firmly behind her. In the days that followed, Marlow and Lia's conspiracy deepened. They crafted a narrative of Esme as an inexperienced outsider, playing on Beckett's guilt at having chosen someone unworthy of the Worth name. First, they planted doubts. Marlow casually informed Mrs. Worth that Esme was overwhelmed by the household workload, painting herself as the dutiful helper and casting Esme as an interfering stranger. Lia amplified the whisper campaign in town, mentioning over brunch with other society wives that Beckett's new bride had grand ambitions, but lacked the pedigree to execute them. Soon, every friendly nod to Esme felt laden with skepticism. Every compliment to Marlow's helpfulness came at Esme's expense. Esme sensed the pressure building, but had little proof. Then came the first major blow. Lia invited herself to dine with Beckett at Heartwood Roastery under the guise of catching up. She arrived late afternoon, slipped into a quiet corner of the cafe, and when Beckett brought her a double espresso, she leaned forward conspiratorially. "Tell me about Esme," she urged. Beckett, puzzled, recounted Esme's background, her bohemian childhood, her journalism degree, her flair for creative cooking. Lia listened with gentle interest, then leaned back. "She sounds wonderful," she said, "but do you think she understands the Worth legacy? The family expects certain standards." Beckett shook his head. "She's learning." Lia smiled. "Learning is good, but expectations matter more. Word of Lia's concern made its way back to the manor. Mrs. Worth, anxious, cornered Esme in the conservatory. "Lia mentioned you're still adjusting," she said softly. "She worries you're not keeping up with Worth traditions." Esme's chest tightened. "Mother, I'm doing my best. I want to honor every tradition." But Mrs. Worth, visibly unsettled, mistook Esme's earnest plea for defensiveness. "Tradition is at the heart of this family," she said. "We must be sure our matriarchs and heirs uphold it." Esme stammered, "I promise." Marlow stepped out of the shadows then, arms crossed and eyes cold. Perhaps Esme should spend more time learning the Worth archives. She gestured to the library door.
There are pages to read if she has the time.
Marlow's tone implied Esme's time management was suspect. Mrs. Worth nodded uncomfortably, and Esme realized her opportunities to shine were being deliberately narrowed. The culmination of Marlow and Lia's plot arrived on a Friday morning when Esme discovered a hastily scrawled note taped to her journal. "Meet us in the drawing room at noon. We need to discuss family matters." Beneath it was an official-looking envelope bearing the Worth crest in gold foil. Inside, Esme found a letter, a proposal co-signed by Marlow and Lia, urging Beckett to consider appointing Lia as an honorary Worth ambassador to promote the family's brand, and suggesting Esme's role be limited to hostess duties rather than decision-making. The letter criticized Esme's recent event planning as irrelevant to the Worth brand and lauded Lia's corporate experience as indispensable. It was crafted to look like a formal petition for family council, an attempt to legitimize Lia's interference and sideline Esme entirely. Horrified, Esme clutched the letter. She trembled not from fear, though that was present, but from indignation. She knew the next move would seal her fate. Gathering her courage, she went to the drawing room, where Marlow and Lia waited. Marlow was seated on the silk-upholstered settee, graceful and composed. Lia stood behind her, arms crossed and a triumphant smile playing on her lips. Beckett arrived moments later. Curiosity etched on his face. He saw Esme clutching the letter. "Esme," he asked gently. Esme took a breath and held the letter up. "I found this." Her voice was steady as she began to read the petition aloud, emphasizing the lines that undercut her. "We propose Ms. Monroe serve as ambassador to the Worth name, drawing on her PR expertise, and recommend that Mrs. Caldwell focus on domestic hospitality duties." Beckett's jaw tightened. Marlow's eyes narrowed. Lia folded her arms. The room felt electrically charged, as if each wall and piece of furniture was straining to hear the verdict. Esme pressed on. "This letter purports to serve the family's best interests, but it was drafted without my knowledge, signed only by you two, and seeks to redefine my role in a way I never agreed to." Silence fell. Beckett looked at Marlow, then at Lia, then back at Esme. "Esme, why would you think?" He was cut off by Marlow's cool retort. "Beckett, you've entrusted your family's legacy to both of us. Surely you understand my concerns." Lia added softly, "It's only practical." Beckett's gaze shifted from Marlow's confident composure to Esme's earnest eyes. "Is that true?" he asked Esme. Esme swallowed. "My only concern has been to honor Worth traditions and contribute my strengths. I did not authorize this letter." She met Marlow's gaze. "I won't accept being sidelined by a petition." Beckett exhaled and turned to Lia. "You wrote this." Lia faltered for a fraction of a second. "I drafted it." Her voice lost its luster. "I care about our family's public image." Beckett's eyes grew steely. "My family's image includes my wife. She is not a liability to be minimized." He turned to Marlow, voice low but firm. "Marlow, was this your idea?" Marlow looked away, silence answering for her. Beckett's jaw clenched. He stepped forward. "Our family decisions are made as a unit, not in secret." Marlow stood, lips pressed tight. "If you insist on airing every concern in public, then perhaps Worth hospitality will suffer." Beckett's eyes flickered with hurt. "I'm defending Esme, not hurting our hospitality. Lia, Marlow, this ends now." He walked to Esme's side and placed a protective hand on her shoulder. I won't tolerate conspiracies against my wife." In the stunned stillness that followed, Lia's face drained of color. She straightened, then turned on her heel and fled the room. Marlow watched her go, expression inscrutable, before giving Esme a curt nod and retreating down the hallway. Esme sank into an armchair, legs trembling. Beckett knelt before her, concern and remorse in his eyes. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I never imagined they would go this far." Esme closed her eyes and took a breath, steadying herself. "Thank you for believing in me." She opened her eyes and found new determination there. "They can't control me through secret letters. I will not be relegated to the margins." Beckett smiled, relief flooding his features. "You belong by my side always." As they rose together, the storm outside broke into a gentle rain, tapping against the windows like applause. Esme realized that the conspiracy of Marlow and Lia had uncovered truths about the Worth family she needed to confront, but it had also revealed the strength of her own position. Loved by her husband and valued by his matriarch, she would weather any plot, silent or overt, to prove she was worthy of her place, and that worth was not simply a legacy to preserve, but a story to be enriched by her presence. From that moment on, the conspiracy no longer held power over Esme. She had unmasked her adversaries and emerged more resolute than ever. And in the quiet aftermath, as she and Beckett walked hand in hand down the candlelit hallway, she knew that no plot, however cunning, could extinguish her resolve to belong, to flourish within the storied walls of Worth Manor. The fallout from Marlow and Lia's conspiracy reached its apex in the days after Esme's decisive rebuttal. Though Esme had exposed their petition, it became clear that their ambitions ran deeper. They had enlisted outside help to damage Esme's reputation and undermine her role in the Worth family. What began as whispered doubts and doctored letters grew into something that demanded more than familial intervention. It required legal redress. It started with a carefully placed rumor at Heartwood Roastery. A barista overheard Lia telling a visiting socialite that Esme had leaked proprietary roastery recipes online. The socialite, aghast, spread the allegation among Portland's philanthropic circles. Within 24 hours, Esme received an anonymous email containing screenshots of a private recipe forum with Esme's name typed in comments. The screenshots were manipulated. The IP address belonged to Lia, but the digital fingerprints were disguised. Beckett, frantic, confronted Lia, who feigned outrage. "I couldn't bear to think our family brand would be compromised. I thought you would want to know." Beckett believed her, though Esme's instincts told her something darker was at play. Determined to clear her name, Esme turned to her friend and former colleague, Marcus Chen, now an IT forensics specialist. Over coffee in the Worth pantry, where Esme had stashed her laptop, she showed him the screenshots. Marcus's brow furrowed as he examined the metadata. "These timestamps are off," he noted. "And see here? The file hashes don't match any known Worth documents. Whoever did this used a proxy server to spoof the IP, then inserted your name as the author. This was targeted tampering." Esme felt her heart tighten. "So I can prove I didn't do it?" Marcus nodded. "I can trace the proxy and identify the real source. We'll need to act quickly. Digital evidence can vanish." Armed with Marcus's report, Esme arranged a meeting with Beckett and Mrs. Worth in the library. She laid out the findings, the timestamps, the mismatched hashes, and the proxy trail leading back to Lia's corporate workstation at her PR firm. Beckett's face paled as Mrs. Worth listened, shock turning to indignation. "This is forgery," Mrs. Worth declared. "We cannot allow this to stand." Marlow, summoned to the library under false pretenses, arrived in crisp linen and paused at the door. Beckett looked at Marlow. "Help us understand," he said calmly. "Why would someone impersonate Esme online?" Marlow's lips thinned. She opened her mouth, but Mrs. Worth cut in. "We have proof that this was orchestrated. Marcus's forensic report is conclusive." She held out a printed summary. Marlow glanced at the pages and paled slightly. "This is surprising." She ran a hand through her hair. "I had no knowledge." Beckett interjected, voice firm. Enough. We're taking this to the district attorney. Forgery is a crime. If anyone defamed Esme, they will be held accountable. Marlow's composure cracked for the first time. Lia's name hung between them like a guillotine's blade. Within days, local authorities opened an investigation. The DA's cyber fraud unit subpoenaed logs from Lia's PR firm, served search warrants on computer systems, and interviewed employees. Esme sat through hours of depositions, recounting every interaction with Lia and Marlow. She supplied text messages summoning her to the drawing room, emails with doctored attachments, and Marcus's expert analysis. The Worth family stood firmly behind her. Beckett accompanied her to each meeting, while Mrs. Worth sat in on interviews to ensure her daughter-in-law was treated fairly. As the investigation progressed, evidence mounted. Lia's desktop browser history contained multiple visits to the private recipe forum, followed by rapid-file downloads. Security camera footage from the neighborhood coffee shop recorded Lia copying pages of Esme's journal she had left by mistake. A forensic timeline placed Lia at multiple locations where false evidence was planted. The DA's office compiled a case file that branded Lia's actions as malicious deception and digital defamation. When the DA formally charged Lia with identity theft, forgery, and defamation, the news reverberated through Portland's social pages. Worth scandal. PR exec charged in cyber defamation plot, read the headlines. Marlow, though not formally indicted, came under intense scrutiny for her role in orchestrating the campaign. The Worth family faced an awkward reckoning, their beloved daughter and sister implicated in a criminal scheme. At a press conference outside the DA's office, Beckett spoke on Esme's behalf. "My wife, Esme Caldwell, is not only innocent but has demonstrated immense strength and dignity under attack. We are grateful to the DA's office for upholding justice." Esme stood beside him, her voice steady as she added, "I hope this case is a cautionary tale about the power and danger of digital manipulation. Thank you for standing with me." In the weeks that followed, Lia's trial loomed. The DA called Marcus Chen to testify on forensic evidence, and Esme took the stand to recount Lia's betrayal. Witnesses from Heartwood Roastery described Lia's suspicious meetings with socialites, while employees from her firm confirmed her unauthorized server access. Under oath, Lia's demeanor shifted from defiance to fear as the weight of proof mounted. Marlow, forced to testify about her unsolicited petition and private conversations, offered halting answers under cross-examination. Her defense, that she had acted out of genuine concern for the family brand, crumbled against the evidence of collusion. When the jury delivered a guilty verdict on all counts, the courtroom exhaled. Esme watched Lia's shoulders slump as the judge read the sentence: probation, restitution for Esme's legal fees, and mandatory digital ethics counseling. Marlow, though not criminally charged, faced civil repercussions. Esme filed a suit for defamation and emotional distress, seeking damages for the trauma inflicted on her reputation and mental health. The Worth family, aligned behind Esme, testified in support of her claims, underscoring the breach of trust that had fractured their household. Outside the courthouse, Beckett enveloped Esme in a relieved embrace. Mrs. Worth, tears in her eyes, offered a quiet apology for ever doubting her. Even Marlow, at a distance, watched with conflicted grief, her ambition laid bare, her social standing irrevocably damaged. In the aftermath, rebuilding began. The Worths issued a public apology to Esme across local media, acknowledging the harm done. Heartwood Roastery hosted a unity brunch in Esme's honor, raising funds for digital literacy programs to prevent cyber defamation. Esme herself turned her ordeal into advocacy, partnering with the DA's office to speak at seminars on online safety and identity protection. Her voice, once silenced by conspiracy, now rang with authority and compassion. As summer gave way to fall, Esme walked the manor gardens with Beckett, the air crisp and laden with fallen leaves. She paused by the greenhouse where she had weathered the fiercest blooms of conflict. "We did it," she said softly, tracing her hand along the glass. Justice was served. Beckett kissed her temple. "You turned adversity into strength." Esme smiled, eyes shining. And we did it together. For Esme Caldwell, the legal intervention was more than vindication. It was the defining moment that cemented her place in the Worth family. In exposing the conspiracy and seeking justice, she had proven that integrity, resilience, and truth could overcome even the most calculated betrayal. And as the autumn sun cast long shadows across Maple Avenue, she knew the legacy she would leave was one of courage and unwavering grace under fire. The courtroom's heavy oak doors swung shut behind Lia Monroe, and with them vanished the last echoes of the conspiracy that had plagued Worth Manor. In the hush that followed, Esme Caldwell withdrew in a deep, unhurried breath, feeling the weight she hadn't realized she'd carried finally lift. Outside, a gentle December snowfall drifted down Maple Avenue, humming against the wrought iron gates and coating the hedges in soft white. The world felt reborn, crisp, forgiving, alive with promise. Esme rose before dawn the next morning, as she had every day since moving into Worth Manor. She slipped on slippers beside her four-poster bed and made her way down the wide oak hallway, passing portraits of Worth ancestors who gazed solemnly from gilt frames. At the far end, the glass conservatory, it had been her sanctuary, beckoned with its cluster of verdant life. Inside, lavender fronds danced in the low morning light, ferns unfurled their spirals, and succulents sprouted new leaves like emerald flames. She poured herself a cup of single-origin espresso from Heartwood Roastery, Beckett's latest roast, its steam curling in the cold air. In her leather-bound journal she recorded new entries. Plan community seed swap, February. Host digital safety seminar, March. Expand children's corner in cafe, April. Launch Founders and Flowers Festival, May. Each line represented a seed of possibility, not a bullet point of critique. A soft knock sounded at the conservatory door. Beckett entered, carrying a fleece blanket, his hair mussed from a late-night roast test. He draped the blanket around Esme's shoulders and kissed her temple. "Good morning," he whispered. "Good morning," she replied, leaning into him. "Ready for renewal?" "Always," he said. That Saturday afternoon, the conservatory transformed into a buzzing hub of activity. Folding chairs lined the glass walls, and long tables held trays of soil, pots, and gardening tools. A sign in elegant script read, "Succulence and Resilience with Esme Caldwell Worth." Neighbors and local gardeners filled the seats. Couples clutching clay pots, families balancing toddlers and watering cans, retirees with notepads. Esme guided them through succulent propagation, explaining the delicate balance of sun and shade, the promise of new growth from a single leaf. Mrs. Worth drifted among the chairs, offering herbal tea, Esme's own blend of lavender chamomile, and nodding with pride. Marlow stood at the back, distributing handouts on respectful pruning and soil pH levels, genuinely engaged. Afterward, Marlow approached Esme with a small air plant. "Thank you for including me," she said quietly. Esme accepted the gift, her heart full. "I'm glad you're here." That evening, the Worth family gathered for a simple harvest dinner in the dining room, its windows frosted but warm with candlelight. A butternut squash soup appeared in earthenware bowls, sage-roasted chicken glistened on platters, and rosemary focaccia fresh from Esme's oven filled the air with its peppery aroma. The long oak table, once draped in heavy silks, now bore a single linen runner and a low centerpiece of white orchids amidst green succulents, symbols of tradition rooted in new growth. Mrs. Worth, radiant in emerald silk, raised her glass of Worth Reserve Pinot Noir. "To Esme," she began, voice thick with emotion, "whose courage has reminded us that our legacy is forged in kindness and strength." Beckett joined her toast, eyes shining. "To new traditions." Marlow lifted her water glass in a tentative salute. Esme felt tears prick her eyes as she returned the toast, surrounded not by judgment, but by genuine warmth. In the following weeks, Esme transformed her ordeal into community advocacy. Partnering with the district attorney's cyber fraud unit, she co-hosted digital safety seminars every Tuesday evening in the back room of Heartwood Roastery. The cafe's reclaimed wood tables held laptops and handouts, while baristas served free lavender honey lattes to attendees. Marcus Chun, the IT forensic specialist who had unraveled Lia's scheme, lectured on recognizing phishing attempts and securing personal data. Esme spoke from the heart about identity theft, forged documents, and defamation, urging her audience to protect their names and their integrity. News outlets dubbed her Portland's cyber guardian. Schools invited her to assemblies. Libraries hosted Q&A panels. She became a beacon of trust, guiding veterans securing email accounts, seniors exploring social media, and teens navigating online ethics. Each seminar ended with applause. Each handshake a promise that no one would endure her trials alone. Meanwhile, Marlow Sinclair embarked on her own path of redemption. She enrolled in conflict resolution courses at Portland State, earned her certification in family mediation, and volunteered at community centers guiding families through difficult conversations. Every Saturday, she joined Esme in the greenhouse, where together they repotted succulents, arranged seed-starting trays, and pruned roses in companionable silence. One morning, Marlow presented Esme with a fully fleshed-out plan for a citywide seed swap, complete with vendor contacts, signage templates, and promotional ideas. Esme hugged her in gratitude. "We're partners now." As spring edged in, Esme prepared for the arrival of her first child. The nursery, painted in soft sage and ivory, brimmed with plush toys, hand-stitched quilts, and a crib swathed in the quilt Marlow had stitched, lavender, coffee beans, and succulents woven into vibrant patterns. Beckett and Esme spent evenings setting up a mobile of birds and ferns, reading parenting books late into the night. Heartwood Roastery hosted Baby Latte Sundays, where regulars brought homemade treats and baby board books. Esme turned a back corner of the cafe into a resource center for new parents, offering workshops on organic weaning foods and postpartum mindfulness. Then winter returned in earnest. The first snow of December blanketing the avenue in crystalline white. On a snowy morning, Esme's daughter Clara Aurora Worth arrived, wailing with perfect vigor at 7 pounds, 3 ounces. Esme cradled her newborn in the hospital room's gentle light, while Beckett stood by her side, eyes full of tears. Mrs. Worth hovered at the door, tears glistening as she stepped forward. "Welcome, Clara," she whispered. Marlow knelt beside them, laying Clara's tiny hand on her own heart. Years passed like petals opening to the sun. Esme published Roots of Resilience, a memoir blending personal narrative with practical advice on overcoming betrayal and building community trust. Profits funded scholarships for digital ethics programs at local high schools. Beckett grew Heartwood Roastery into a regional institution of 10 cafes, each featuring Esme's Corner, a rotating art gallery and open mic poetry stage. Marlow, now director of a prominent mediation center, led corporate and family workshops on respectful communication, often citing Worth Manor's transformation as her inspiration. Every spring, the conservatory's glass panes thrummed with life for the Founders and Flowers Festival. Visitors as far away as Salem and Vancouver traveled to plant heirloom seeds, attend digital safety booths, and sip lavender latte tastings. Little Clara, now 5, helped her mother distribute seed packets, her laughter a bell-like accompaniment to the hum of bees and happy chatter. On the first snowfall of Clara's 8th birthday, Esme and Beckett walked hand in hand down Maple Avenue. The brick sidewalk glowed under street lamps. Neighbors in woolen scarves waved from warmly lit porches. Esme's gaze drifted to the wrought iron gates of Worth Manor, where new climbing roses wrapped the trellis in pink and white, a testament to patience, care, and renewal. Beckett paused, pulling Esme close. "Look how far we've come," he whispered. Esme smiled, watching Clara chase snowflakes at the curb, her laughter pure and free. Together, we grew stronger than any storm. Inside, the hallway featured updated portraits. Esme's visage joined Elijah Worth's and the Worth ancestors, framed simply in gold, proof she was no mere footnote, but a central branch of the family tree. Beneath the frames, a single plaque read, "In unity and truth, Our roots run deepest. Esme traced the inscription with a fingertip, recalling every trial and triumph. She turned to Beckett and whispered, "Home." And as snowflakes drifted against the windows of Worth Manor, the house exhaled in contentment, its legacy enriched by courage, compassion, and a love that bloomed eternal. And that brings us to the end of today's story on Truistory Vibes. Don't forget to leave a comment with a quote or moment that touched you the most. Your words give our team the motivation to keep creating more heartfelt stories. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again soon.